The boutique smelled like jasmine candles and new fabric, that comforting mix that always makes me forget life outside for a while. I was running my fingers through soft dresses, humming to myself, grateful for a Saturday that was finally mine. The sunlight poured through the window, warm and kind, brushing my face as I exhaled. For weeks, I'd been surviving on routine, meetings, dinners, endless chores. But today, I felt free. Then I heard a voice, bright and familiar. "Oh, you're back." I turned, smiling politely. "Sorry?" I asked, half expecting her to mistake me for someone else, but the saleswoman grinned wider. "Did you end up liking the red dress your husband bought last week?" Her words hit me like a sudden gust of wind, disorienting, sharp. My throat tightened, but I smiled anyway. "Red dress?" I repeated, forcing a light laugh. "Oh, yes. I loved it." My voice didn't even sound like mine. It was the kind of voice women use when they're trying not to fall apart in public. After that, everything blurred. The hangers clinked softly, the jazz played on, and I just stood there, pretending to browse. My chest felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out the air inside me. I bought a blouse I didn't need, just to leave with something in my hands, something to ground me. As I walked out into the afternoon light, my smile faded completely. And while the city hummed around me, one thought kept echoing in my head. I don't even own a red dress. The walk home felt longer than usual. The city looked the same. Same cafe on the corner, same woman walking her dog. But everything around me felt unreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. I replayed the conversation in my head again and again, hoping I'd imagined it. Maybe she got the wrong person. Maybe it wasn't my husband, but the details were too precise. Tall, dark hair, blue shirt. That was David, down to the last word. The air felt heavy in my lungs as I tried to convince myself it was all just a mistake. By the time I reached my building, the afternoon sun had already faded into a soft amber glow. I paused in the elevator, staring at my reflection in the mirrored wall. My lipstick was perfect, my hair in place, yet something in my eyes looked foreign, like I was watching myself play a role I didn't audition for. When the doors opened, I walked into our apartment, greeted by the faint smell of his cologne, the one that used to make me feel safe. Now it felt like a stranger's scent lingering in my home. I dropped my bag on the couch and sat down, feeling the cushions sink beneath me as if the room itself exhaled. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached for my phone, tempted to text him, to ask something casual like, "Did you get me something from the Velvet Rose?" But I stopped. No. I wasn't ready to hear whatever lie might follow. Instead, I stared at the quiet apartment, the framed photos, the soft light, the vase of wilting flowers, and wondered when exactly love had started feeling like doubt. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes, a red dress swirling under boutique lights, a woman smiling, David's voice saying something soft I couldn't quite hear. My mind tried to fill in the blanks, and every version hurt. Around 2 a.m., I got up and wandered through the apartment, the floor cold beneath my bare feet. His shoes were by the door, perfectly lined up, like nothing in our life was out of order. But everything felt wrong. Even the silence between us had started to feel too familiar. I stopped in front of the closet, staring at the rows of clothes I'd carefully arranged over the years. My dresses hung in neat color order, blues, creams, soft pastels. No red. I brushed my hand along the hangers, almost expecting one to appear, but of course it didn't. The emptiness between those fabrics felt louder than any scream. It wasn't just about the dress anymore. It was about a truth that was starting to whisper through the cracks, something my heart already knew but my mind refused to say aloud. I crawled back into bed before sunrise, pretending to be asleep when he finally came home. He kissed my forehead, whispered something about an early meeting, and turned off the light. I kept my breathing steady, calm, controlled. On the outside, I was the same wife he'd always known. But inside, something had shifted. Something sharp, alert, and quietly waiting. Because once you're asked the wrong question, you can never unhear it. And I already knew. Nothing in our life would sound the same again. By evening, the air in the house felt heavier than usual, thick with something unsaid. I'd set the table, lit a candle, and poured 2 glasses of wine. Rituals I used to find comforting. Now they felt rehearsed, mechanical, like props in a play I no longer wanted to star in. When I heard his key turn in the lock, I straightened up, smoothing the folds of my blouse, my face carefully arranged into warmth. He walked in, smiled, kissed my cheek. "How was work today?" I asked, my voice steady. He sighed, tired. "Long, exhausting. I'm starving." I watched him move around the kitchen, loosening his tie, humming under his breath. He looked like the same man I'd loved for years, calm, reliable, predictable. But once you notice a lie, even a small one, everything starts to look like a performance. I smiled and said softly, "You've been spoiling me lately. I heard you even bought me something last week." He froze, just for a second, but I caught it. That blink, that twitch of surprise he didn't think I'd see. "What? Oh, must have been someone else," he said, shrugging it off. My smile didn't reach my eyes. "Right, must have been." We ate dinner like nothing had happened. He talked about the market, about his boss, about traffic, and I nodded, even laughed once or twice. But under the table, my hand clenched around my napkin until my knuckles whitened. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe us. But the echo of that saleswoman's voice wouldn't leave me. When he excused himself to shower, I stayed at the table, staring at his untouched wine. That's when I decided, if there were cracks forming, I'd stop pretending not to see them. When he went to shower, I slipped into the bathroom down the hall, the one he rarely used. My reflection in the mirror looked strangely composed, too calm, almost unfamiliar. I pulled out my phone, the screen lighting up my face in the dim room. My thumb hovered over our banking app. For a second, I hesitated. Part of me still wanted to be wrong, to discover that my mind had twisted something innocent. But then I opened it. The numbers loaded slowly, like fate taking its time to appear. And there it was, the Velvet Rose Boutique, $1,200. My stomach tightened, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I took a screenshot, the click of the button echoing through the tiled room like a verdict. My breathing turned shallow, quiet, mechanical. It wasn't just a purchase, it was proof, evidence wrapped in decimals and dates. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, then locked my phone and pressed it to my chest. So it wasn't just a gift, I whispered. It was an investment. The word left a bitter taste in my mouth, like metal. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The tears would come later, when I had the luxury to feel. When I stepped out, the sound of running water filled the hallway. His silhouette moved behind the shower curtain, the same man who'd told me he was exhausted from work. I stood there for a moment, listening to the rhythm of the water, steady, rhythmic, ordinary. It should have been comforting. Instead, it sounded like distance. When he called out, "Babe, could you grab me a towel?" I found one, placed it on the counter, and smiled as if nothing had changed. But everything had. I was no longer the woman who didn't own a red dress. I was the woman who finally knew why. That night he slept soundly beside me, his breathing slow and even, as if guilt had no weight. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, tracing invisible cracks in the plaster like they were constellations of truth. Every exhale from him felt like a lie brushing against my skin. I studied the rise and fall of his chest and wondered how many other stories it had held, whispered, laughed, promised. The kind of wondering that burns slow, quiet, the kind that doesn't end when the lights go out. My pillow was cold beneath my cheek, and the silence in the room pressed heavy against my ears. I thought about the boutique again, the perfume in the air, the soft music, the red fabric glowing under warm light. Somewhere out there, that dress existed. Maybe hanging in another woman's closet. Maybe worn already, somewhere intimate, where laughter replaced the vows I still honored. The thought didn't break me. It built something colder. The kind of strength born from betrayal, quiet and deliberate. I realized that night that heartbreak doesn't come crashing. It seeps in, drip by drip, until you're drowning before you even notice you're wet. Before dawn, I got up, poured myself a glass of water, and stood by the window. The city was just waking up, unaware that mine had already collapsed. I told myself I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. Rage without evidence is dismissed as hysteria. I knew that well. No, I would be patient. I would gather every thread, every inconsistency, every faint scent of her perfume. Let him think I was blind a little longer, because when the time came, I wouldn't just question him. I'd end him, quietly, gracefully, in the only language betrayal understands. I started watching him the way you watch a television episode you don't want to be true. Small things stood out first. A perfume note on his collar that wasn't mine. A new crease in his jacket. His phone lay face down on the table more often, a silent stone between us, and he guarded it like a secret. He began choosing shirts with sharper collars, shoes that shone, as if he were dressing for someone else. Every morning I'd study him over coffee, cataloging differences, pretending I was doing nothing at all. Inside, my pulse sharpened into something fierce. Suspicion had grown teeth and wasn't going away. There were nights he claimed late meetings and came home smelling faintly of a different soap. I told myself stories to preserve the life I knew, explanations that would let me sleep. But the explanations frayed at the edges, and with each fray, I felt less safe in my own house. So the Friday I decided to follow him, I felt oddly calm, like a woman stepping into the center of a plan. I trailed him in my car, careful not to be obvious, hands steady on the wheel though my heart raced. The city lights blurred past, and every red light felt like a small mercy giving me time to breathe. He parked outside a restaurant and walked in, as ordinary as a man heading to dinner. I waited, pretending to read a text, watching the door like a hawk watches the ground. Then she arrived, a woman in red, exactly the dress from the boutique, turning heads as she moved. She kissed him on the cheek the way someone kisses a secret into life, easy and intimate. My fingers tightened on my phone. I took pictures because proof is a kind of armor I needed. I left before they could notice me, driving home with my hands cold and my mind already shaping what would come next. When I got home, the apartment felt too quiet, like the walls were holding their breath. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through the photos one by one, his hand on her back, her laughter, the red dress glowing under the restaurant lights. Each image cut deeper than the last, but they also stitched something new inside me. Clarity. For years, I'd believed that love was patience, that forgiveness was strength. But staring at those photos, I saw something truer. That betrayal thrives in silence, and I was done being quiet. The woman in red had unknowingly written the final chapter of the story David thought he controlled. I studied the timestamps on the photos, cross-checking them with his text messages. While he'd written, "Working late, don't wait up," he was pouring wine into her glass. The precision of it almost impressed me. He'd become fluent in deceit, but I wasn't angry anymore, not in the wild, reckless way I expected. No, my anger was cool, almost elegant, the kind that plans before it strikes. I knew I wouldn't confront him yet. I wanted him to feel safe, to keep lying, to believe I was still blind. So I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, answered emails, the choreography of a normal night. I left his plate of leftovers covered in the fridge, even wrote him a note. "Dinner's waiting. Love you." It wasn't love. It was bait, wrapped in handwriting he trusted. When I finally lay down, I looked at the ceiling again, the same cracks, the same faint hum of the night outside. Only now, those cracks looked like blueprints. Because when someone breaks your heart, you don't always fall apart. Sometimes you start building something new from the ruins. The next morning, I woke before him. The sunlight was pale, quiet, and almost kind, as if it didn't know what I'd seen the night before. He stirred, mumbled something about coffee, and went about his day as though the world hadn't cracked open. I watched him tie his tie in the mirror, the same hands that had touched her. I wondered if guilt made his reflection heavier, or if men like him simply adjusted the knot and kept moving. He kissed my cheek, warm and practiced, and I smiled like a woman still fooled. Inside, I was memorizing every lie disguised as affection. When he left, I opened my laptop and began cataloging everything: the photos, the receipts, the credit card statements. Each file was labeled neatly, methodically, like I was building a case instead of living a life. And maybe I was. Because what's a marriage if not a long list of evidence, of what's real and what's not? I backed everything up twice, naming the folder Truth in Red. It felt fitting, poetic even. Every secret he'd hidden, now preserved in pixels. If he thought I'd crumble, he underestimated just how steady a betrayed woman can be. By evening, I'd stopped shaking. The sadness dulled into focus, into strategy. There would be no screaming, no crying, no dramatic confrontation. I'd seen women do that before, and lose everything in the process. No, mine would be quieter, more deliberate, the kind of revenge that doesn't stain your hands, only your memory. I poured myself a glass of wine, the same kind she'd sipped with him, and smiled faintly at the taste. Because I finally knew something he didn't. His story with her had already ended. He just hadn't realized who was writing the final scene. The next evening, I cooked his favorite dinner: roasted salmon, lemon risotto, and a bottle of the wine he always saved for special occasions. I set the table with candles and linen napkins, every detail deliberate, every gesture calculated. To anyone else, it would have looked like love. To me, it was theater, a slow dance before the fall. When he came home, he looked pleasantly surprised. "What's all this?" he asked, kissing the air near my cheek. I smiled softly. "I thought we could celebrate. Just us." The words slid out effortlessly, honeyed and harmless, but beneath them was something sharp and waiting. We sat across from each other, laughter filling the spaces where truth should have been. He talked about work, about how stressful the audit had been. The irony almost made me laugh. I listened, nodding, refilling his glass, watching how easily he performed. He didn't see the difference in my eyes, how the softness had shifted into something steel-like, reflective. When he complimented the meal, I thanked him, tilting my head slightly, studying him the way you study a man who's about to be remembered for the wrong reasons. He leaned back, relaxed, confident. And that's when I knew the timing was perfect. Halfway through dinner, I reached for my glass and smiled, almost tenderly. "By the way," I said, casual, conversational, "did you ever get that red dress tailored? It looked a little tight on her hips." The words landed between us like a knife dropped onto porcelain. He froze, mid-breath, wine halfway to his lips, color draining from his face. "What? What are you talking about?" he stammered. I tilted my head, my smile unwavering. "The woman in the restaurant, David. The one wearing my birthday dress." For a moment, he didn't speak. His eyes darted toward mine, searching for softness, for an escape hatch. But there was none. Only the steady reflection of his own panic staring back at him. He set the wineglass down too quickly, the stem rattling against the plate. "Elena, it's not what you think." I almost laughed. That tired line, the anthem of men caught in their own web. I reached for my phone, unlocked it, and slid it across the table toward him. "Don't worry," I said, calm and slow. I didn't think. I knew. On the screen, the photos glowed. Him at the restaurant, her in the red dress, their smiles lit by candlelight. He looked at them the way a man looks at a verdict being read aloud. His lips parted, but no words came out. He just shook his head, pale and small in the flicker of candlelight. "Who took these?" he whispered, as if that mattered. "I did," I answered, my tone steady, almost kind. "You really should be more careful when you're cheating within driving distance." He reached for my hand, desperate, but I pulled it away, slowly, deliberately, letting silence finish the sentence he didn't deserve. "I can explain," he tried again, voice trembling, but I was already done listening. "I'm sure you can," I said, pushing my chair back. You always were good at making lies sound like logic. The candles flickered as I stood, their light trembling like the last pulse of something dying. You wanted her to feel special? Don't worry, I said, picking up my wine. She'll soon have all your attention, because you won't have me. I walked past him, the hem of my dress brushing the floor, graceful, measured, final. Behind me, his voice cracked my name, but I didn't turn around. Not once. I didn't slam the door when I left. I wanted him to hear the quiet, the kind of silence that stays after something breaks. Outside, the night was cool and sharp, the air tasting cleaner than it had in months. My heels clicked against the pavement, each step deliberate, echoing like punctuation marks to a story I'd just ended. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. The part of me that used to ache for answers had finally gone still. It was strange. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like calm, like finally exhaling after years of holding your breath. And in that stillness, I realized revenge wasn't about rage. It was about reclaiming the narrative. When I reached my car, I sat for a while, hands on the steering wheel, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My mascara hadn't smudged. My lipstick was perfect. For the first time, I didn't look like the woman who'd been deceived. I looked like the woman who'd decided what came next, because this wasn't going to end with tears or shattered glass. No, that would be too simple. David had taught me the language of deceit. Now I'd rewrite it in one he couldn't speak. One built on strategy, silence, and the elegance of consequences. Back home, I poured another glass of wine and opened my laptop. His company files sat neatly on the shared drive. All those late nights I'd spent balancing his books suddenly became useful. I didn't have to destroy him. I just had to let the truth breathe. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, calm and steady, ready to expose every hidden transaction, every falsified receipt. He'd once told me that numbers never lie, and I smiled because he was about to learn how right he was. The setup was complete. Tomorrow, the fall would begin. 2 weeks later, the cracks I'd carved into his world had started to widen. I didn't have to lift a finger anymore. The system was doing it for me. A missing expense report here, an unexplained charge there. All I'd done was shine a light on what he thought would stay hidden. By the time his company called him in for a routine review, I was already sipping coffee at my desk, pretending not to know a thing. When his call came through that afternoon, the panic in his voice was almost melodic. "Elena, what did you do?" he barked. I smiled into the silence before answering. "Oh, David," I said sweetly. "You know me. I just keep everything organized. You'd be amazed at what your company reimburses these days." He cursed under his breath, his words tripping over anger and fear. "You're destroying me." "No," I said, my tone calm, almost soothing. "You destroyed yourself when you started charging your love life to corporate accounts." There was a pause, a hollow sound that might have been him breathing through his regret. "You can't do this," he said. "You can't ruin my career." I laughed softly. "I didn't ruin it, David. I just stopped protecting it." When the line went dead, I felt a strange peace wash over me. Not joy, not triumph, but closure. He'd always believed I was predictable, too moral, too forgiving. He never realized that forgiveness can be weaponized when you know how to aim it. That evening, I heard from a mutual friend that he'd been suspended pending investigation. The woman in red? Gone, of course. Loyalty tends to vanish the moment the money does. I poured myself a glass of wine, raised it slightly to the empty chair across from me, and whispered, "To accountability." The following days unfolded like a quiet symphony of justice. Emails circulated, whispers spread, and David's name began to rot in the places it once gleamed. By midweek, his company had frozen his corporate accounts, pending investigation. I didn't celebrate, not outwardly. I went to work, smiled at coworkers, and sipped my tea while the world rearranged itself exactly as I'd planned. There was a beauty in subtle ruin. Watching someone who'd built his life on deceit finally meet the math of his own lies. Every transaction, every falsified dinner, every client meeting now told the truth I no longer needed to. He called again one evening, his voice brittle, splintered. "Elena, please, we can fix this." I leaned against the counter, swirling my wine, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound between us. "Fix?" I repeated softly. "You fix a broken vase, not a broken trust." He begged. I could hear the tremor, the disbelief that I wasn't rushing to comfort him. But I'd learned something powerful. Love isn't measured by how much you endure, but by when you finally stop. "Goodbye, David," I said, and this time, I meant it. That night, I opened my balcony door and let the city air rush in, crisp, alive, unapologetic. I looked out at the skyline, the hum of traffic below, the faint glow of shop signs in the distance. Somewhere out there, the Velvet Rose Boutique was still open, its windows gleaming with new arrivals. I thought about that first question, the one that had changed everything. It didn't hurt anymore. It almost felt like gratitude. Because sometimes you need the wrong dress to realize you've been wearing the wrong life. A week later, word spread that David had been let go. The audit report exposed everything: the misuse of funds, the dinners, the receipts. His polished image cracked overnight, and the silence that followed was almost poetic. The woman in red vanished, leaving nothing behind but a few unanswered calls and an empty bank account. He'd lost his job, his reputation, and the comfort of the life he once took for granted. And somewhere deep inside me, I felt something shift. Not triumph, not cruelty, just release. I packed up the last of his things and set the boxes by the door, labeling each one neatly. No anger, no chaos, just order, the kind that only comes when you've stopped needing closure from anyone but yourself. I found our old wedding photo tucked in a drawer, both of us smiling, eyes full of promises neither of us could keep. I looked at it for a moment, then slipped it into the trash without ceremony. It didn't sting anymore. It simply didn't belong to me. The woman in that picture had been naive enough to trust. The woman standing here had learned to rebuild. That evening, I took a long bath, lit a candle, and let the warm water wash away the last of it. The lies, the ache, the red dress, all of it dissolved into something weightless. I realized then that revenge wasn't about hurting him. It was about remembering myself. When I closed my eyes, I saw peace. Not a man, not a betrayal, but a horizon. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without dreaming of what was lost, because what remained was stronger, sharper, and entirely mine. Months later, I found myself standing once again beneath the soft lights of the Velvet Rose Boutique. The air still smelled faintly of jasmine and new silk, the same scent that once triggered everything. The saleswoman noticed me before I even spoke. Her smile faltered, recognition flickering behind her eyes. "Oh, it's you," she said, her voice small, apologetic. "I'm so sorry about last time. I didn't mean—" I smiled, genuine this time. "It's all right," I told her. "You actually did me a favor." Because she'd handed me the truth wrapped in ribbon, and I'd unwrapped a new life. I wandered through the racks, my fingers brushing along fabrics that shimmered like quiet confessions. Then I saw it. A red dress, rich and unapologetic, draped over a mannequin with the confidence of a woman who owed no explanations. It was elegant, bold, alive. Everything I'd forgotten I could be. The saleswoman approached hesitantly. "Would you like to try it on?" she asked. I held the fabric between my fingers, soft as promise, strong as memory. "No need," I said, smiling. "I already know it fits me perfectly." At the register, I handed over my card without flinching. This time, the purchase wasn't a secret or a betrayal. It was a declaration. I walked out into the afternoon sunlight, the bag swinging lightly at my side, the city humming around me. For the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of nothing. Not pain, not anger, just peace. He'd bought a dress to impress another woman. I bought mine to forget him, and to remember myself. And as I stepped into the light, I realized something beautifully simple. Revenge can look a lot like freedom.